Schultz. I'm the store manager here at the Barnes & Noble in Canton, and I want to thank you all for joining us on this very special occasion. We're thrilled to have Mr. Ralph Nader in our store today. Named by The Atlantic as one of the most influential figures in American history, and by Time and Life magazines as one of the most influential Americans of the 20th century, Ralph Nader has helped us drive safer cars, eat healthier food, breathe better air, drink cleaner water, and work in safer environments for more than 4 decades. The iconic champion of consumer rights first made headlines in 1965 with his pioneering bestseller, Unsafe at Any Speed, a devastating indictment that lambasted the auto industry for producing unsafe vehicles. The book led to congressional hearings and automobile safety laws passed in 1966, including the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act. Mr. Nader was instrumental in the creation of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. Many lives have been saved by Ralph Nader's involvement in the recall of millions of unsafe consumer products, including defective motor vehicles, and in the protection of laborers and in the environment. By starting dozens of citizen groups, Mr. Nader has created an atmosphere of corporate and governmental accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you Mr. Ralph Nader.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you all for coming. All those achievements, by the way, were due to a small number of people back home and Congress. Congress, Congress, Congress. It's all about Congress if we want to break through on one redirection and reform after another. And it's amazing how much that obvious fact is ignored by very concerned and informed people back home who will go to marches and demonstrations, show up at town meetings, and look at the decay of our country, the lost opportunities for the young, all the things that they know about, and they will not conclude that the next step is 535 people in Congress. Congress happens to be the most powerful branch of government by far, and it's the smallest branch of government by far compared to the judiciary and the executive. And guess what? We know their names, don't we? There are 535 of them, 100 senators, 435 representatives. We're millions of progressive people back home. What's our excuse? We don't cross the bridge. We protest, we demand. I'm not talking about dropouts from democracy. I'm not talking about people who've given up on themselves. I'm not talking about non-voters. I'm not talking about people whose cynicism is so deep that they destroy their own effectiveness by withdrawing from the political fray. The plutocracy loves cynical citizens who do that. I'm talking about the 20 million progressive people in this country who vote, who show up at town meetings, and who know who their members of Congress are, but they don't cross the bridge. Now you see all the concern about climate disruption and climate catastrophe. Never use the word climate change. You know, we grew up in New England. Climate change means summer, autumn, winter, and spring. You know, the climate disruption, destroying parts of the earth, making parts of the earth uninhabitable, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. We call it climate change. So climate disruption, climate violence, climate catastrophe. And there are a lot of people back home here who are worried about it, and they know about it, and they've read about it, and they have gone to meetings about it. Some of them have filed lawsuits about it. But they don't summon the members of Congress to their own town meetings in Avon, Simsbury, Canton, Winsted. Why not? Isn't that an incredible oversight? Who says that the town meetings have to be choreographed by your senator and representative, end up with 90% of the seats empty, and the whole thing's rigged? We have our own town meetings, our own agenda, our own time, our own place, and we invite them to listen to our agenda. We even brief them ahead of time so they do their homework, so they don't just come and smile and nod when they hear that we want full Medicare for all. We want a living wage. We want our government to wage peace and end the empire. We want a clean and safe environment. We want a pro-children policy instead of taking health insurance and necessary food and necessary environmental protection away from our children by the plutocrats, the corporatists, and their henchmen in the Trump regime, as they're now doing. Can anybody stop us from doing that? Tell me. Who can stop us from setting up a town meeting, having a minimum of 500 people, clearly on the petition, inviting the senator, representative, clearly put your occupation, profession, clearly put your email, telephone number, and address, not some illegible petition where they can't read the names. 500 people will get a senator to your town meeting. 300 people will get a representative to your town meeting. Anybody stop you from doing that? Tell me, who can stop you from doing that? There's plenty of clipboards, plenty of street corners, plenty of social clubs, plenty of front porches to climb up and knock on the door, plenty of friends, plenty of relatives, plenty of co-workers. Who can stop you from doing that? Once you eyeball them in a town meeting and they look around and they see, what's going on here? Is a liberal here, progressive here, conservative here? They both want a living wage? They all want a living wage? How surprising. They all want health care so they can live and get diagnosed and treated in time with emphasis on prevention? How surprising. Oh my, a conservative, liberal, they bleed the same way? What do they have, the same color liver? Kidney? When they see a liberal and conservatives in an auditorium, it's over. They lose. They don't know how to game it. They know how to game the liberal. They know how to game the conservative, take sides. They don't know how to game the left-right collaboration. And all kinds of changes in this country are supported by liberals and conservatives. You don't think they want their schools renovated and maintained? You don't think they want their roads and bridges renovated and maintained? You don't think they want clean drinking water and sewage systems that don't break and antiquated pipes? You think they don't want their kids to breathe clean air, drink clean water, have safe food? You think they like all those tax escapes that the multinationals get away with? They're heading for tax-exempt status. This is nonsense. Divide and rule, red state, blue state, conservative versus liberal. That's the way for 2,000 years. The few have controlled the many. How dim can we be? Of course we know that. It just has to go to the frontier of our consciousness. It's the Congress. It's the Congress. Anybody want to sing a tune? It's the Congress. It's 535. About 160 of them are on your side on most of the issues to begin with. What kind of power you have? Well, do you know any corporations that have the power of the preamble of the Constitution? You think the Constitution starts we, the corporation? Does it start we, the Congress? Where's the sovereign power? We, the people. You know about this. I'm really speaking to you so you can pick up some of these arguments in a crisp way and start spreading it out to your friends, co-workers, neighbors, and relatives. So we start out with the sovereign power. There is no word in the Constitution for corporation, company, or political parties. They're not mentioned in the entire Constitution. Why are they ruling us? Because we allow them to. We delegate the power to them and then turn and watch the Super Bowl. We delegate the power to them and turn and play bridge. Don't say we don't have enough time. A lot of people don't have time. Try a single mother with 3 children, 2 low-paying jobs, commute. That's not enough time. Although I've seen some of them actually pitch in with some phone calls. A lot of people. Why do you think the entertainment industry is so big? The only way the entertainment industry exists is because people give them their leisure time. Okay, so we have people who are stamp collectors, coin collectors, bird watchers, bless them. They deal with collectibles of all kinds, you know, and they spend 300 to 500 hours a year on their hobby, and maybe spend up to $1,000 on their hobby. I can tell you bridge players spend a lot of money going to tournaments. You should see the magazine for bridge players. It's unbelievably complex and detailed. Imagine people had that kind of knowledge in Congress. Just 1% of them? How about 1%? That's all you need, representing majority opinion, on which there's plenty of majority opinion, on the issues that are off the table that matter greatly to people, but they're off the table by the Democrats and Republicans. It's getting a little better, some new Democrats are getting elected. So you're talking to a neighbor, you're at the diner, whatever, taking a walk, walking your dog. I calculated once that the number of hours people walk their dog in one day, more hours than the entire citizenry spends watching Congress. So isn't Congress worth one day's dog walk? No. Let's put it down to the community level. You're talking to cynical people, people who've given up on themselves, people who are despairing. They don't think their children are going to be as well off as they are, and they're not all that well off. Their pension was broken by the Wall Street crimes in 2008. Their wages are frozen. They got a president who said, I think Americans are overpaid, the workers are overpaid, and he got away with it. He said it during the campaign. That should have been the end of the Trump campaign right there. 30 million people making less in 2018 than the workers made in 1968, adjusted for inflation, and he says they're overpaid. What are we, asleep? So let's say someone knocks on your door. Hi, I'm your new neighbor. Just want to introduce myself. And by the way, you know, I happen to spend 24% of your income. And I can decide whether we go to war or not, or let the president get us into these quagmire wars of empire. And I can also cut deals with corporations so they can pollute your air and water. And I can give away the tax base for corporations and the super rich so that we just don't have enough money to repair your public services in your community, your roads and mass transit and bridges and drinking water systems and schools and so on. And by the way, I can totally ignore the well-being of your children. I can let the pesticide producers put stuff that's killing children today. Just want you to know who I am. I'm your member of Congress. See you later. Starts walking down the sidewalk. You're standing there. What do you say? What do you say? Why you interrupted my looking at the third rerun of Friends? Or do you say, hey, you mean a lot to me, and my family, and my children, and my grandchildren, and my neighborhood, and my community, and my state, and my country, and my world. Come back here. I got some instructions to give you. I'm the sovereign. You're my hired hand. And you've taken our power and turned it against us for a bunch of campaign contributions and a future job in the corporate world, paying a high salary after you leave the Congress. Now, do you think I've gotten anywhere with this message? Or I've made this message in every state in the country. I've made it in front of 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden. I've made it at the Target Center in Minnesota. I've made it in auditoriums. I've made it on television. I've made it on radio. I've written about it. I've written books about it. Over 30 years. It's about 30 years ago, we lost our majority in Congress. We lost what we were able to do continually for our country. We were able to get the environmental protection law through with a fairly decent majority in Congress. Auto safety, 3.5 million prevented deaths since then. We got through the Consumer Cooperative Bank. We got through the Product Safety Commission. A lot of good things. Freedom of Information Act, Toxic Substances Act. Can't get anything today. Can't get any hearings today. Totally corrupt, exclusionary dominated Congress. A little better in the House now, but the Senate, Congress as a whole is a cocoon, open for business, closed for the people. It is secretive. The power is concentrated in the hands of 4 people. 535, they've given it to McConnell, Schumer, Pelosi, and McCarthy. McConnell said the other day, I'm the one who decides what gets voted on in the Senate. Oh, really? I didn't know Kentucky was a country. So Congress itself is not just bought and sold. How many of you have tried to reach your member of Congress recently? How many of you have even tried to reach a staffer? I just called Senator Blumenthal. We're on good terms. He's going to do something about the FAA. He wants to put in a criminal penalty for corporate crimes. He doesn't even know what I went through yesterday. We lost our grandniece in the Ethiopian crash, 24 years old. Rising leader in global health. Leadership written all over her. Compassion all over her. Intellectual rigor all over her. Experience in Africa all over her. 24 years old. Published in professional journals. Invited to professional conferences. So I'm calling Senator Blumenthal because I sent him a letter a week earlier. Here's what happened. I dial the senator's office. He comes on in voicemail, says, we really want to hear you, but our people are now on other lines. Just hold on and we'll get to you. And we really want to hear from you. This is Dick Blumenthal. By the way, it's much worse in many other Senate and House offices. This is unheard of, by the way, until voicemail came and internet came. So I wait. 15 minutes of military music. That's what they pick. Military music, right? That's just what we want to hear, right? Military music. And I gave up 15 minutes. So I told my assistant, I said, you call. She called, and she got voicemail. She didn't get military music, deprived. She got voicemail. I'm his constituent. Call up an intern in Hartford, intern office phone. I didn't know she was an intern. So she treated me like I was looking for a missing VA check. I said, look, we're talking about the Ethiopian crash. We're talking about the toady FAA. We're talking about the Congress abdicating its responsibility for airline safety, among 1,000 other things. Totally clueless. I said, do you know who I am? And she said, no. I said, well, I think Senator Blumenthal does. So I said, well, could you tell me what your full name is? She said, we're not permitted to give out our last name. I said, oh, really? It's public office, right? So she said, I will refer you to Joe. I said, what's Joe's last name? He's the deputy director. She said, I can't give out the last name. Joe calls me back. His name is Joe Gonzalez. I said, Joe, what's going on? You can't give your last name? He said, no, that's nonsense. She's just an intern. She doesn't know. This is the kind of stuff we have to go through in Washington. There are senators and representatives who put their switchboard on voicemail for the whole day. Rand Paul locks his office. You have to stand outside his glass office, look in, have your phone, and dial. Inside the Senate office building, which is guarded by a battalion of police. Cocoon. It's a cocoon. If you cannot reach your members the way we used to, bing, 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 you can't get anything done, period. This is not just a minor irritation. You cannot get anything done. That's where the town meeting comes in. Come here, Senator. Come here, Representative. By the way, if you don't think 500 clearly written names with occupation, profession, and contact numbers is enough, just let me know. I'll double it. That's what really scares them. A rising tide, you see? So in the 70s, we write this book, Who Runs Congress, the best-selling book in American history on Congress. So I want to update it. And the publishers say, nobody's interested in Congress, reading Congress. You know, they see it on, they see C-SPAN, they see it on the web. I said, I beg your pardon. Congress is the biggest roadblock to democracy. It's the hired hand of Wall Street. And no one's interested in Congress. And I go through all the denials, what they deny us, how deadly their inaction is, or procrastination, what they pass and enact. Didn't matter. So I resorted to fiction. I figured I'd get them from the bottom up. This is a fable, but it's deadly serious after you stop laughing. It's designed to make you laugh yourself serious. To organize, right here, a Congress watchdog group. Just for fun, we call it a Congress Rat Watchers group. Here's how it starts. Brilliant pictorial description. It starts with a rat infestation in Congress. There is a rat infestation in Washington. It's never been worse. A lot of parties, a lot of garbage cans, stuff, water everywhere. And one intrepid rat climbs up into the toilet bowl of the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House has a constipation problem. And he leaves a morning meeting with his assistants designed to further destroy any proposal to raise the minimum wage on behalf of his corporate paymasters. And he rushes to his private bathroom. And he sits down and he hears a rustle. And he looks down And he goes crazy, shouting up and up. He says, a rat in the toilet bowl. And that's the way the whole book starts. And the leaders are embarrassed. They can't stop the rats from doing what rats want to do. They follow where the water and the food is. And they're coming up the toilets. And more members see. And they try to suppress it. And one reporter hears these bellows of alarm. And he breaks the story. It goes all over the mass media. Massive derision. Everybody's laughing at Congress. Late night shows, jokes, cartoons, you name it. Some active citizens say, you know what? This is a great moment of opportunity because tens of millions of people are paying attention to Congress, even if it's derisive. And of course, the members double up on the ridiculous way they're trying to suppress it. They hire all kinds of rodent-killing firms and have problems with raticides and contaminating parts of Congress, and they call in the national security people from the White House. It just gets worse for them, the derision. So these citizen groups who've been waiting for tens of millions of people to pay attention start organizing. And that's when this book gets deadly practical and serious. This book is worth 5 college courses on how Congress really doesn't work and how it's supposed to work. And on the back is the most succinct critique of Congress on one page you'll ever see. And that's what you confront your member of Congress with at the town meeting. And once he knows that you know a lot, that you can't be sugar-coated, you can't be flattered, you can't be flummoxed, you can't be fooled, the whole dynamic changes. The whole dynamic changes. And once we get control of Congress from 1,500 or so corporations who prowl on Capitol Hill daily, the whole country can begin to turn around. First, we get all the things that Western Europe and Canada have, long overdue, full health care, etc., paid vacation, good public transit in Europe, good pensions, the kind of public parks, upkeep, assistance to the arts, of course, higher minimum wages, stronger labor unions, powerful consumer cooperatives, more multi-party political activity, no electoral college nonsense where they can win the popular vote and lose the office. And once we do that, once we catch up with Western Europe, and a lot of what's in Japan and Taiwan, I might add. Never mind Israel. Israel's an economic military powerhouse. And we're giving technical, financial aid to Israel. They have full health insurance. They have pensions. They have strong labor unions. Maybe they should give assistance to us. What do you think, Stanley? Maybe they should give assistance to us. We're way down on the totem pole. We're like 22nd in infant mortality. We're 24th in wages now. In 1980, we were first in wages. We have the most number of people percentage in jail. Pretty exceptional country in some ways. And look how they manipulate us with language. How many times you read in the paper or on TV, Democratic centrists, Democratic leftists, right? What's the definition of a centrist? for the Democrats. It's someone who proposes changes that don't have a majority support. A leftist is proposing changes that have huge majority support. 80% minimum wage increase, cracking down on corporate crime, eliminating crony capitalism, corporate welfare, handouts, bailouts, subsidies, giveaways, half of what Washington does every day. They call them leftists. And you know, they don't try to correct it. Is Bernie Sanders a leftist? He's a total centrist. Everything he proposes supported by a majority of the people in this country. Once we let our views be categorized in a way that can marginalize us, we're on the defensive, we're backpedaling instead of on the offensive. Who are the fascists? Who are the plutocrats? Who are the oligarchies? Who are the politicians? Who are their lapdogs? That's the way to go on the offensive. Do you have any idea where this country is going to be in 10, 20, 30 years, given the present trends? 40% of Florida's population lives on land 8 feet or less from above sea level. That whole area is going to be gone. They already have an evacuation plan for Miami Beach. A lot of New York will be gone. Not to mention other things, spreading pestilence, all kinds of diseases because of the habitat changes, malaria, infectious diseases, tornadoes, furious tornadoes, more frequent. Look what the hurricane did to Mozambique and those African countries. They've never seen anything like this. And that's just the beginning. Is that what we want to leave to our descendants? We don't want to wake up for ourselves. Let's wake up for our children and grandchildren. Maybe, as Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, once said, you know, if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your children and grandchildren. Most people, you know, that'll wake up people. The worse things get, the more motivated you should be. We do not have the luxury of dropping out. We do not have the luxury of disconnecting. We do not have the luxury of discouragement. We redefine moral courage. And moral courage is much more difficult for people than physical courage. People will suddenly move to help somebody in danger. Moral courage gets retaliated against day after day after day. You can lose your job, you get ostracized, you get maligned on the internet, but moral courage is what we need. We need people who are not blistered by moonbeams. We need people who keep saying to themselves, the biggest authority to turn our country around, the Congress, the tax power, the spending power, the confirmation power, the war-making power, and the peacemaking power, the public budget power, the consumer protection power, the worker protection power. You want to expand the list? And there are only 535 of them. You know what it really starts with? It doesn't start with Congress. It doesn't start with anything other than civic self-respect. Do you think you count? Do you think you matter? Do you think you're going to lead? The answer is no. You're not going to live a very happy life. Because sensitive people who feel that everything around them are closed doors get very despairing, very dismayed. Their morale is shattered. And you know where all that leads. well beyond Valium, it implodes. So the pursuit of happiness is preceded by the pursuit of justice. That's what's needed. And I want you to help me. Why, for 30 years, I've been saying this, we don't have one Congress watchdog group in America. Why not in John Larson's district? Why not in Rosa Dolores' district? Why not in Joe Courtney, nuclear subman district? We outnumber them. We outvote the big money bags. Money nullifies our vote, and the reason why the politicians prefer the money bags to our vote is because our vote is not organized. It's not targeted. It's not sufficiently informed. It's not sufficiently turned out. It's not sufficiently focused on competitive party democracy, not a two-party duopoly. So I'm going to end there, and I want to ask you the following. Given Amazon, I consider Barnes & Noble a small business. We love independent bookstores. And now we like Barnes & Noble because it's on Main Street. It's here. It has events. They're not censored. You buy from Amazon for a discount, you're destroying Main Street. You're destroying small business. You're destroying people-to-people contact. And you're supporting a monster that wants to get rid of all its workers with robots in warehouses, a monster that has a tiny board of directors that's been made rich by Jeff Bezos with stock options and is a total rubber stamp, a monster that wants to deliver everything to your home by drones, a monster that doesn't give a whit about community life. Go ahead and support Amazon. You're cutting community legs from under you. Amazon doesn't pay the taxes for your local schools, your fire, police department, your road upkeep. They don't pay property taxes. They escape sales taxes. They're starting to pay sales taxes. But for years, Congress allowed them to destroy small businesses who have to pay 6, 7, 8% sales tax. They have to add it. And Amazon got a windfall, right? I mean, 6 to 7% on retail sales, a small margin. That's how they got their leg up. That's how they became the monster they are. So we want to sell books. They've got nice books here. If you have 2 books, How the Rats Reform Congress, Laugh Yourself Seriously, with your own discussion group. By the way, you know, people are ordering this 5 at a time from us in Washington. I've never seen this before. 40% of all the orders coming in, we want 5 at a time. It could be some living room discussion going on here. And then this is how Bush and Obama paved the way for the Trump presidency and why it isn't too late to reverse course. It's called, that's a new one I put out. And then if you buy 2 of these, this is a classic book. It's called The Natural History of the Rich, a field guide, anecdotal, witty, and wonderfully informative. This is really a great book. Came out a few years ago, and this is the premium. You can give it to a library, give it to a friend for the holidays, whatever. This is a premium if you buy 2 of these books now. I'll autograph them to your friends or to you if you'd like. I want to say one more thing. Reading is at a premium, as you know. I mean, the millennials, you catch them with a book, you want to give them the Nobel Prize for literature. You give them a book, and they say, do I have to carry it? Used to give a young person a book, it was a recognition of their intelligence, right? That's very, very serious. They think they read on the, turn on the machine. That's not reading. That's skipping. Hopscotch. We have to get them to read. They can read this, makes them laugh. And then suddenly they see their future's at stake. They may not get jobs, automation. They might not get their pensions. They may not get health insurance. They move into their 20s and 30s. On and on. Makes them aware. So on your behalf, on your friends, co-workers, relatives, children, local library, buy them all up. Buy them all up. If you want my weekly column free, 7 Minutes of Agitation, go to nader.org and you get it free. Sign up, you get it automatically every week. And my radio hour is the Ralph Nader Radio Hour. It's on WPKN. How many listen to WPKN? Okay, Sunday at 6, I interview Walter Hang of Toxics Targeting from Ithaca, New York. Of all the 400 programs I have done, this is the one I want you to listen to. This is a small business of less than 10 people. He tells you if there are toxic dumps or contamination, if you want to buy a house or you want to put a school building, because he has all the data from the government, but he makes it site-specific. In New York State, he wants to branch out. When you see what he and a tiny number of people accomplished by putting forth the data, wrapping it around the public advocacy strategy, getting people out at rallies, and focusing on the single decision maker in government. That's how they banned fracking in New York State. No other state has banned fracking. Didn't take more than a couple thousand people. Who did they focus on? The number one person who had to make the decision, Governor Andrew Cuomo. Everywhere he went, they were there. Signs, chants, protests. When he said, we'll decide on the science, they provided him with the science. With the contamination of the water, all the chemicals used, the desecration of the land, the ruts in the roads, these huge trucks, the fleecing of the royalty agreements. When he said, well, Pennsylvania does it, they said, okay, we'll show you what happened to Pennsylvania. We'll show you what happened to Pennsylvania. When he said, well, we need the jobs, you say, there are far more jobs in New York State with wind power, solar, home installation. It's the fastest growing industry in the country. And they turned him around. You got to listen to Walter Hang and how he did it. And he says, where are the big environmental groups with their huge budgets and their outsourced fundraising and their distance from the people back home? What are they accomplishing in the era of Trump? WPKN, 6 p.m. Sunday. Thank you very much. So we can have discussion now, and Katie?
Yeah, we're gonna walk the mic to you.
She's going to give you the mic.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to hear, when somebody's asking from the back. Okay. So we're gonna do some shuttling, so bear with me. Does anybody have a question? Oh, it's pretty loud, so.
Hi.
Sorry.
I'm a professor. And
Yeah, just get a little closer.
yeah, I'm a professor, and
Okay.
one thing I would add to it is education.
You're at a community
And
college.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Tunxus, right?
Tunxus, that's
Yeah.
right, yes. What I noticed teaching American government is that students,
Yeah,
I
get
had
closer.
I had to educate them
Yes.
on American government.
Yeah.
One of my students asked me what the GOP was, which was the GOP. And I informed them, and eventually there was a problem in Unionville, changing the roads.
Yeah,
And she ended up being one of the people in charge of
Yeah.
making the change in the local area.
yeah.
So I think one thing is that our high schools are not educating
That's
people
right.
as I did when I was in high school. I learned about the Constitution. I had a course in civics. I'm also a mock trial judge. But the whole part about what our purpose of our education is not being given to our students. And I think one point is that every parent should make sure that
That's
the
right.
American government is taught in the schools.
right.
That students told me that, one student told me that we have a right to tell our leaders.
Can you all hear back there? Yeah,
Yeah, one student told me.
Get a little closer.
And also that we didn't have a right to tell our leaders, our politicians what to do.
Yeah.
So I think there's a problem here that when I was going to school, we understood our civil rights.
Okay.
We understood what our government was about, and they don't seem to have that anymore, from what I can see.
okay. High school's a lot of waste of time now.
For you.
They waste a lot of time. Like, the two areas of law they need to get taught is contract law, because they click on, they have all these privacy invasions, commercializing their information, they get ripped off in the credit cards, and they should learn the law of wrongful injury. They get bullied, they get assaulted, they get contaminated air, water, they get opiates, all that criminal marketing. And you can't tell me high school students can't learn these rudiments of contract and tort law that relate to their daily lives, right? Not taught. Zero. What is it? They just want computer literacy? What about civic literacy? What about defense, their own protection? You got to go to the high schools and say, nonsense. You can teach the rudiments of tort law in 2 hours and leave them with something to read. This idea that they don't get it, there's a professor who taught at Mount Holyoke tax law to undergraduates, the first one in America. And he decided that he's going to teach high school students tax law. I said, John, his name is John Fox, you're going to teach these kids tax law? He said, they get it. There's no problem. They start telling me how they're going to advise their own parents. This idea, if you have low standards for students, they'll oblige you. If you have high standards for students, they'll surprise you, right? Someone else, please. Tell them to put it close.
Yeah, we're gonna try to minimize feedback here, folks. Sorry.
I'm not very good with microphones, but I just want to say that because I listened to your podcasts, I got involved in the National Popular Vote Compact.
yeah.
I wrote testimony, which I had never done before, and presented it. I didn't present it, but I forwarded it to the legislature, and it passed last year.
That's
So
right.
Connecticut is now part of the National Popular Vote Compact.
There you are.
And that's because of you. But
It's
I'm
because of you,
also-
too. Yeah.
I'm also recently retired, and now I feel that I have the time and I feel an obligation to become more active, and I've sort of focused on voting rights because I didn't want to get too scattered. But what could we do to organize retired people who actually have some time and really have an obligation to make our world better?
Can you hear me, by the way? Yeah,
It's hard without the mic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
that's all right. Okay, that's a double question. It's wonderful to see. Do you all know about nationalpopularvote.org to get rid of, neutralize the Electoral College? They've already got states representing 182 electoral votes. They need to go to 270. They've passed along Connecticut and New Jersey and New York, Illinois, California, and all the laws are the same. They say when we get to 270 electoral college votes, that's a majority, we will throw our electoral college votes to whoever wins the popular vote for president. So they don't have to repeal the electoral college. They just neutralize it. And that is started by a wealthy progressive person, Steve Silberstein, in San Francisco. He has 6 lobbyists go around the country. And the Democrats have lost 2 presidential campaigns in 16 years because they won the popular vote in 2000, 2016, lost the electoral college vote, and they still won't jump on this bandwagon. But Connecticut is one of the more recent states that passed it, and it's now up to 182, and you can see how listening to it, mobilizing, she wrote the testimony, and they got the word, and it's passed. Retired people are a huge resource, not only because they've been around and they have some more experience and wisdom than younger people may have, but they have the time. And they also are very worried about future generations, who are their children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So I want to emphasize again, every civic initiative that you pursue, ask yourself, who is in the government is going to get it done? And more often than not, it's going to be your Congress and your state legislature. So when you have huge rallies, don't let the energy go into the ether on a weekend. You want to have it go up and focus right on Congress or the state legislature. Otherwise, it fritters into oblivion. It's just a good memory on Saturday afternoon. Always back on your senators and your representatives, and you'll see what happens.
Steve Tracy from Goshen, Connecticut. I was in a pretty serious automobile accident about 17 years ago. I credit the seatbelt and the airbag that probably wouldn't have been there without you for the fact that I walked away in pretty good shape. So this is my thanks, my opportunity to say thank you.
Thank you. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And it's interesting how people who have these stories, very few of them write a letter to the editor or publicize them. So it's really important because, you know, the auto companies are swarming over Capitol Hill, and they always trying to pull it back and stop more safety features that are very inexpensive and reduce your auto insurance. I love when they said to me, do you know the seatbelts and airbags are expensive? I said, really? I said, how expensive is your auto insurance? The more deaths, injuries, and crummy bumpers for property damage, the higher your auto insurance. And that's every year. A seatbelt and airbag is amortized very rapidly. One-time investment. It's kind of a technical insurance policy. So you always have to connect all of this.
I think your sister.
Could the lady who worked on the National Popular Vote give her name and contact so we can connect?
Yes, she said she would.
Absolutely.
By the way, there's a clipboard was passed around. Okay, so if any of you want to start a Congress watchdog group here, just let us know. Where's James? Yeah. No, another James.
I'm not James, but I'm resume.
James? Okay. He's the one with the clipboard. He works with us, James Eaton. So if you want to start it, just get a hold of him, tell him your contact number, and all the people here, your little community, how many of you are in John Larson's district? Yeah, there's quite a few. Anyhow, this tells you not only how to do it, it leads you to a website that shows you step by step how to form a Congress watchdog group. I mean, there's hardly nothing left for your imagination and everything left for your civic energy and determination. So it's called ratsreformcongress.org. It's a wonderful instruction set of materials, ratsreformcongress.org, on how to set one up. It's no big deal, but It's always good to get a leg up.
Get a couple more questions.
Yes.
Sorry. I'm gonna come around.
Hi, thank you very much for being here today. I'm just curious to get your thoughts. What do you think of the Green New Deal that's been proposed?
Question? Yeah, I'll get that. On the Green New Deal? The Green New Deal is an aspiration of replacing fossil fuels with renewables and energy efficiency. It has to have its blanks filled in. So what? I mean, why are people running away with it? I mean, do they away from it? Do they want to have a world of fossil fuel combustion and climate disruption and the domination of these fossil fuel industries over their elected representatives? Or do they want to benefit from the sun, which is the best gift the Earth has ever had, right? I wonder what the sun thinks of the inhabitants of the Earth. They spend all the time digging up stuff from underground instead of taking the wind, the tides, the sun, passive, active solar, energy efficiency, burn less. Why that's even controversial is absurd. They're picking at it, you know, saying, well, it's going to cost trillions of dollars. Well, what do you think the current system is costing? It's costing quadrillions of dollars that aren't even tabulated, which is the destruction of the Earth's climate patterns, quite apart from what's costing in terms of respiratory ailments, cancer, contaminated soil, food, and a corrupted politics. You know, the Democrats don't know how to argue their own case. They just don't know how to argue single payer. Let me tell you, have you ever heard a Democrat supporting single payer? And make the following two additional points. Single payer means that you can get rid of almost $350 billion of billing fraud every year. That's billion. That's almost $1 billion a day, almost. Says who? You always ask, who says this when someone throws a fact out? The leading expert in the country, Malcolm Sparrow, Harvard University, applied mathematician, backed up by a congressional report in 1992 that 10% of everything we spend is defrauded. That's $350 billion. Do you ever say that's the benefit of single payer? And here's the real amazing gap. Every week, 5,000 Americans die from preventable problems in hospitals. Hospital-induced infections, medical malpractice, neglect at key points in the middle of the night, whatever, okay? Who says so? The doctors at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, among other doctor reports. And it came out 2.5, 3 years ago. It was a one-day story. That's 250,000 Americans a year who are dying from preventable problems. And have you ever heard a single-payer advocate say one reason for single payer is that, according to a Harvard Medical School peer-reviewed study, 800 Americans a week die because they can't afford health insurance to get diagnosed and treated in time. That's 800 Americans every week. They don't know how to argue the case. They can't defend the country from the most ignorant, vicious, cruel, corporate indentured, warmongering Republican Party in history since 1854. They can't defend the country. They're being landslided until recently by these cruel, vicious people. Donald Trump, the Koch brothers, and all the corporations that back them in their greed and overreaching. They can't defend the country. They can't defend us from this worst party because they're dialing for the same corporate dollars, because they're inhibiting themselves from being able to simply upgrade Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. That's not a big deal, upgrading the New Deal. He wanted full health insurance. He set up the minimum wage. All these are old frameworks that they didn't update and modernize, and we let them do it. We let them say, oh, you got to vote for us and Democrats. And you say, why? What do you stand for? And they lower their voice and they say, do you know how bad the Republicans are? Boy, that's quite a yardstick to be measured by, huh? Instead of how good they can become.
You had a question?
I didn't have a question, I actually want to talk to you.
Oh, okay. Good. So we're in the welcome. So I'm going to try to hand it over because I'm afraid if I go down that side, I'm going to go through that.
Testing. Mr. Nader, thank you so very much for being here, a long-term fan. I'm just wondering two things. One is whether we can follow the protocols outlined in your book for any civic initiative. And the second thing is more personal to me. It has to do with forced medical procedures and vaccines. And I'm just wondering what you might share with us, because there's so much momentum against individual freedoms right now. And
What was the first question?
just whether or not we can, any civic initiative can, if we follow your
Yeah.
protocol, or if you have some recommendations about priorities and whatnot, we just we want to all kind of come together and identify and support the most
Okay.
important initiatives, and
Okay.
also the forced vaccines and medical procedures are a huge concern.
Okay. This book has about 30 major redirections and reforms in it that were changed by the uprising in Congress. So it's very substantive, specific. You know, some of them full Medicare. There are others, though, tax area, cracking down on corporate crime, ending corporate welfare, redirecting public budgets back home to expand, improve, renovate public services, and so on. So there's no dearth, but one thing we didn't discuss is the nuclear arms race. And we are now being pushed by the military-industrial complex, and especially Republicans and some Democrats in Congress, into another massive arms race. They want to spend, it started with Obama, they want to spend $1 trillion to upgrade existing nuclear bombs. After we had the treaties with the Soviet Union where we both, under inspection, cut down our warheads from 30-some thousand to about 7,000 each. It was working. And so the military-industrial complex has to find enemies. How can it justify 53% of our operational federal budget going into weaponry and everything that's involved in that? And this is one area when you see what's possible, they're pushing for autonomous weapons. That's why Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, and a bunch of leading scientists wrote a letter to the world a few years ago saying, if we don't control artificial intelligence or the robots, and they begin replicating themselves and out of control, they're going to destroy the earth. These are not, pie in the sky science fiction types. These are leading technologists and scientists. So that's one. On the vaccine, 3 things. Vaccine is a drug. Like any drugs, some are safe, some are not safe. Look at the opiates, for example. Look at the conventional pharmaceuticals by Pfizer, and Merck, and so on. So vaccines are now exempt from critical scrutiny. That's now. The second thing is, we want to know where these are produced. A majority of finished drugs in this country are not manufactured in this country. The drug companies outsource them to China and Indian labs, which don't have very rigorous FDA inspection. Why aren't they labeled? You want to get an ibuprofen, or you want to get a high blood pressure drug or whatever? Why aren't you allowed to know where they're made? This is after we coddle the drug industry, allow them to charge Americans the highest prices in the world, give them tax credits, give them free subsidies and free clinically developed drugs, free, like AZT, and others from the National Institutes of Health, your agency, and then all kinds of tax credits, and that's not enough for them. They want to go to China, make more money. So,
Oh, there we go.
yeah. So that's one. The second is, where you have a non-contagious disease, you should have a voluntary system. If parents worried about all the vaccines that are coming in at a very young age, how do they connect with each other? Is there enough research? How they interact with each other? In areas where there's non-contagion, they should be able to say no. In the area where there is contagion, there's got to be much more rigorous testing instead of inflicting taboo on discussion. They try to say it's not discussable. You're crazy. You're one of these crazies. Well, you know, do we need to tell them how many books where people died in the hundreds of thousands because of dangerous pharmaceuticals? Have you heard of that Pfizer drug that's supposed to deal with heart disease, and it produced hundreds of thousands of people with heart disease? It caused
Give it just a sec.
it caused heart disease. Have you heard of thalidomide? Thousands of kids without limbs and legs. On and on. So, no taboo. It should be full discussion. The most difficult problem is contagion, where your child is not vaccinated by a safe vaccine. You go to gets a disease, infectious disease, and it affects the other children. That's a very difficult conflict. In some areas where there's really serious disease, it's not difficult in my book. You got to go with a safe vaccine.
There are none.
Okay.
Have a question? I'm just trying to minimize this.
Hi, Stanley Heller. I work for Promoting Enduring Peace. And you mentioned John Larson, and my question is, how do you reach Congress people who don't seem to be too concerned about human rights? This is March 30th. A year ago, the Gaza Palestinians embarked on a almost generally peaceful attempt to demonstrate, to walk back to their old homes, and they've been shot down from high military purchase all around Gaza. And they've lost 200 dead, so many people without limbs. And we go to people like John Larson and we get nowhere. So what kind of advice do you have for those kind of things?
That's Stanley Heller from New Haven. He gives the Gandhi Peace Prize. Great humanitarian peace advocate. This is not a difficult problem. The Palestinians are the ones who are dispossessed. They're the ones who are occupied. They're the ones who are invaded regularly. They're the ones whose 28% of Palestine left, where the water is taken, where the land is stolen, where they have colonials that have been called by Israeli police and soldiers Jewish terrorists for killing innocent Palestinians in their own villages. That's what they called them. Is that anti-Semitic? Let's see, when you get the Jewish police in Israel calling them Jewish terrorists, is that anti-Semitic? The real anti-Semites are those who support the dispossession and the destruction of what's left of Palestine and its people. If you could only see the racist language that is used by high political officials that are part of the present government in Israel, and you say to John Larson and others, you know, you are supporting diplomatically, militarily, and economically a military juggernaut that has all these racist people who want to throw the Palestinians out of the West Bank completely and annex it and continue their illegal military embargo of Gaza. That's anti-Semitism against Arabs. We had a debate once between 2 Jewish Americans and 2 Arab Americans, very civil. It's on the website debatingtaboos.org. Debatingtaboos.org. You can see it. And the question was, is anti-Semitism against Arabs now worse than anti-Semitism against Jews? They had a civil discussion, and they all recognize that both are operational. And you shouldn't ignore one at the expense of the other. And so I think members of Congress who don't disavow those vicious racist elements, you can't even repeat them, they're so vicious, and who go after Ilhan Omar for simply suggesting that maybe the U.S. government is unfairly preferring the Israeli side. They go after her and threaten to take her away her committee assignments, and they're supporting language by people who are in political power over there, who are getting U.S. weapons and U.S. support and U.S. UN cover. And they're getting away with it in Congress and not being called anti-Semites against Arabs. Do you know what the ratio of innocent deaths is in the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians? It's over 400 to 1. 400 innocent Palestinians dying to every one innocent Israeli. And in terms of injuries and disease, because of embargoes, denial of medicine, denial of clean water, it's thousands to 1. Who's occupying who? Who's dispossessing who? Who's invading who? Who's using what tax dollars? U.S. tax dollars. Remember one thing, in 1996, then Prime Minister, as he is now, Netanyahu, gave an address to a joint session of Congress. Not many foreign prime ministers get that privilege, right? And he said one thing that got the biggest standing ovation. I think he got 32 standing ovations. Presidents don't get sometimes that many. And he said, you know, Israel, this is 1996, Israel's economically prosperous, a mature economy, and we're not going to be asking for economic aid from your country. Huge standing ovation. 2019, still giving economic aid to this economic powerhouse in the Middle East. Per capita income, $40,000 a year. The Palestinian income, less than $1,000 a year. So, John Larson, listen to me and all the other members of Congress. There are groups like Jewish Voices for Peace. There are groups like J Street who are going to start saying to you, here's the list of these bigoted, racist, destructive comments by people in political power in the present regime. Disavow them in writing, criticize them in writing, and cut off aid. Otherwise, you will be described intensively as anti-Semites against the Arab Palestinians, just as John Bolton is in the White House, just as Donald Trump cutting off humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, desperate humanitarian aid to Palestinian children, refugees, and to Michael Pompeo, the Secretary of State, who goes around the world threatening countries as if he's Secretary of Defense, a lawless diplomat if I ever saw one.
Got a couple more. You good? All right, you have a question? Okay. Anyway, good to hear.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is Leanne Duquette, and I'm founder of a very recently organized organization called Informed Choice USA. We're dedicated to preserving the integrity of informed consent throughout the United States. We're also trying to systematically respond to the regulatory capture that we're suffering in this country, and specifically this state right now. I'm concerned about people who advocate for single-payer health care, because you lay out a great presentation of the regulatory capture that's happening in our country right now. I'm very concerned for anybody that would advocate for that industry that's completely taken over by a lobby to be in charge of healthcare for Americans. And to further your point, we are now suffering an erosion of our first freedom, of our First Amendment, and our right to practice religions. Many of us don't want to be injected with aborted fetal cells that are used in the production of some of these vaccines. We have 3 states right now that have lost their religious exemptions, and 47 states are at threat by legislation for forced medical procedures. We're working closely with Bobby Kennedy's organization, Children's Health Defense, about, exposing this industry and the regulatory capture that it suffers. I just can't make the connection when you put out a whole great presentation of the regulatory capture and what's going on with Congress, and then advocate for the entire industry to be in charge of our health care. I'm having trouble making that connection. I was hoping you could help me bridge that gap.
Single payer means that the government is the insurer, and then there's private delivery of health, hospitals, doctors, under budgets, reasonable budgets, and oversight. So the government's not delivering health care. It's just paying for it, like in Canada. That's what single payer is. It displaces the private health insurance companies, because that's what Medicare did, except for the gaps in 1964. They were the source of insuring elderly people. We've got to make sure it doesn't have loopholes, it doesn't have undue corporate influence, but there's a very good drafted bill now in the House of Representatives. It's the best bill floating around by Jayapal, led by Congresswoman Jayapal of Seattle. You might want to get a copy of it. I'm not going to go through the whole vaccine stuff again, but there's far more serious coercion than the vaccine area. Far more serious. For example, look at the coercive ingestion of pharmaceuticals. You want to talk about where the doctors don't know how unsafe they are? We have a whole database. Worst pills, best pills. They're all approved by the FDA. Some have very bad side effects, and the others have far less side effects, and they're approved for X ailment, like high blood pressure. And you have tens of thousands of doctors prescribing, with their authority, drugs that have deadly side effects, like gastrointestinal bleeding, dizziness, and even worse. And of course, people say, well, it's the doctor. And the doctor's not doing their homework. They're not going to the database even. So they don't prescribe drugs that don't, worse drugs, and they prescribe the ones that have less side effects. So how about coercive operations that shouldn't be done because they're done for the money? Tens and tens of thousands a year of operations that aren't necessary, done for the money. How about that for coercion, right? So we have to broaden the debate, and we have to stop engaging in taboos and trying to marginalize people. What do they have to fear? But you can't get on radio and TV with these kinds of views. Can't get on NPR. So we have to get rid of the taboos. Go to debatingtaboos.org. We should have a whole series of taboos where you have A versus B, discussing it in a civil manner, and not in sound bites either.
Are you okay for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Maybe you had one. I'll make my way down.
Hi, I'd like to thank you for coming today. I've admired you for a long time in your work, and I appreciate it. I'm a member of the Democratic Socialists in Connecticut, and we're platform is Medicare for All, and we are trying to get the legislators to come on board because all the Connecticut legislators are not for Medicare for All. I think it's because Connecticut is a huge insurance state and there's money to be lost. So I'd just like to make a point of encouraging everyone to get in touch with the legislators and encourage them to be on the Medicare for All platform for Connecticut. And I did my advice of how anybody can do that. I know calling them is difficult, but we're trying to get petitions going and get as many people on board in the community as possible.
Wrong approach.
Really?
James,
Let me see it.
I'm coming.
You can petition until kingdom come. You bring them to your town meetings. Eyeball to eyeball, no flax, no staff intermediating, eyeball to eyeball, town meetings. Otherwise, you'll petition till kingdom come. See how it's important to know the right strategies. By the way, the present system with the networks under Obamacare, you want to talk about coercion. I have friends in West Virginia, and they don't like their narrow network of doctors and hospitals. And if they go outside the network, they'll bankrupt themselves. And what the Obamacare is doing is saying, you will go to these doctors and hospitals.
It'll come back on. I think when you get it too close.
Yeah, so how's that for coercion? In Canada, you have your free choice of doctor and hospital, anywhere in Canada. You hardly ever see a bill. How many of you seen reams of computerized bills and inscrutable code full of fraud that adds up to $350 billion this year? Billion, B. See the coercion? We have to redefine coercion. Corporations control us in the name of free enterprise, in the name of competition, in the name of freedom, in the name of liberty. Don't they love those words? But they are the master coercers of modern history. They make you take it with sugar, with slogans, with ideology that's bred into us starting in grade school. So you do the petition for the town meeting. Vector it to the town meeting all over the country, and you'll get good press. The people are arousing. What's going on? The town meetings are breaking out all over. Members of Congress have got to get rid of their schedule going to fat cat fundraising parties. They have to go to town meeting in this town, town meeting in that city. They have to get down where the people are. Anybody stop you from doing that? Whenever you want to do something to make our democracy work for justice and peace, ask yourself, is anybody stopping me? And the answer is no. Well, what's stopping me? And the answer is me. That's what's stopping you. I think, with your permission, we should try to get these books in circulation in libraries, friends, gifts, relatives, dining room. You'll see that they're written in a very invigorating manner and respectful of your civic potential, no less. Thank you.